Hello there, welcome to this episode of Double Jeopardy, the law and politics podcast with me, Ken Macdonald.
And with me, Tim Owen.
And Tim, as I mentioned to you just before we started recording this, there's something wrong with my headphones and I have a very nasty sound in my ears. It makes it feel as though I'm recording this 30 feet underwater. So I just wanted the listeners to know, the lengths that we will go to the pain we will suffer to bring them this podcast week by week. We're going to carry on regardless and see how we do.
You're sounding good enough to me, but anyway, fingers crossed. Let's go.
Fingers crossed. So this week, Tim and I are going to return to the vexed case of Lucy Letby. The jury, of course, in addition to the medical evidence, had all of the circumstantial evidence which tended, the prosecution would argue, to confirm that there had been foul play here and that Lucy Letby was responsible for it.
I'm not quite sure if that's entirely right. Of course, it's right that it's a circumstantial case with, therefore, an entire jigsaw puzzle of evidence which was then put together and then satisfied the jury that murder took place. But if the fundamental medical evidence of the causation of death, i.e. death caused by homicidal acts or attempted homicidal acts, if that is wrong, then my reading of this case, in particular the Court of Appeal judgment, is that these convictions cannot possibly be sustained as safe, because if that evidence is undermined, then the remaining circumstantial evidence, which looks perhaps powerful against the backdrop of unchallenged scientific evidence, as it was at the trial, that these babies were being murdered, then of course the picture is very different.
That's obviously true, and I accept that if there were no evidence, or if any evidence that had existed as to foul play had been completely demolished, then the most basic building brick in the case disappears. But I think the situation is a bit more nuanced than that. I mean, despite what these eminent doctors have said, I think there is dispute about the scientific evidence. I think the prosecution witnesses would say that these experts were wrong. And my point is that when the jury are considering the case in the course of a criminal trial, of course they have to be satisfied that there was foul play, but it's not just the scientific evidence that existed to satisfy themselves. Let me just give one example that I don't think is hugely well known, but I think it's a very good example and quite a telling example. And this is in respect of baby E. So baby E's mother comes into the room where her baby is in, I think, intensive care. And she comes in unexpectedly, as I understand it. And the baby is lying there. The only nurse in the room, the only other person in the room is Lucy Letby. And the baby is bleeding from the mouth, which is an alarming symptom, obviously. Lucy Letby turns around to the mother and says, "Trust me, I'm a nurse." And then later, when the mother has gone, Lucy Letby excises the fact of her visit, the mother's visit, from the medical records, and then claims that she was in another room, not the room. Lucy Letby, was in another room, not the room that the baby was in, at the time of the bleed. And the finding of the medical experts later was that the fatal bleed was the result of her having interfered with the nasogastric tube. But I mean, it's quite a telling detail, that, isn't it? That after this event, she goes into the hospital records and excises the fact of the mother's visit into the room at the time that the bleed appeared to have occurred. And that's the sort of evidence which the jury, no doubt, would have taken into account when they were weighing the conflicting views of the experts that this was a deliberately dislodged tube, and Lucy Letby's barrister's contention, presumably, that it had been an accident or hadn't happened in that way at all. It's quite a telling little detail, isn't it?